you.
Hi guys. Hi and welcome to Second Perspective.
I'll do it.
Sue, our guest here, was testing out our theme song of QQ. Not working. Anyways, I'm Paul Weston. This is Nathan Smith.
We're gonna cut out the first 30 seconds of this.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
And Sue Park is on our right. This is a spoiler-full. There's got to be a better way of saying that, but basically full of spoilers. Talk of American Sniper. If you're looking more for a review and sort of whether we suggest you should see it or not, go see our short review. It's much shorter than this little. Well, this is not little podcast of American Sniper. But other than that, Nathan, why don't you give us a quick synopsis? Who did this film, and then we'll just get to our opinion.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about American Sniper. This is Clint Eastwood's new movie. It is starring Bradley Cooper, and it is the loosely based on a book, true story of Chris Kyle, who is America's most lethal sniper. He did 4 tours in Iraq, possibly Afghanistan too. I'm actually not too sure about that. But yeah, so it's about the most lethal sniper in U.S. history, and Clint Eastwood, you know, he's known for some pretty great films in the past. And Bradley Cooper, you know, he's a pretty A-line actor right now. So, yeah, let's get in with this with our initial impressions. So, what was yours, Paul?
I gave it, in the short review that we had, a C+. I was bordering on a C+. I kind of wish I gave, I don't know. The main fact of it, for me anyways, is that for the most part it's very ho-hum, as Nathan called it. It has some really nice moments, including the sort of the big scene they used for the trailer where Bradley Cooper's character, Chris Kyle, sort of has to make the decision of whether to shoot the kid or not. There was another moment when another child picks up a rocket launcher and he has to sort of decide whether to shoot the kid or not with the rocket launcher. So those moments were really great, and I felt like the film could have been really interesting, but it just was so... It wasn't necessarily bad, it was just so average. And perhaps I'm being a little bit harsh on this movie, but like when it's getting nominations on like Oscars and stuff like that, It just kind of frustrates me, and I might be taking that out a little bit.
Got quite a few nominations recently, like the Oscars were just announced like a couple weeks ago. And yeah, it got Best Picture, Best Director, I could be wrong with that, but Best Actor for Bradley Cooper as well. I think a few others, so yeah, and then it's making a ton of money, like absolutely a ton of money right now. Part of that may be that there's just nothing else out, but I do think that like the marketing has done a very good job on this.
Yeah.
I think people are actually eager to see it. I was eager to see it.
Very much so.
Yeah, so Sue, what did you think of this film? Just general impressions.
Like the first impression, yeah, I remember thinking in the theater that, oh man, that was a really good cut when he was like deciding whether to shoot the kid or not, and then it cuts to his childhood actually hunting, and the fire goes and the deer, I think, dies or whatever, and that was a really good cut, and I was like, oh, I'm pumped for the rest of this movie, except it just like kind of fluctuates after that, and I would have given it a solid C+ as well right after watching it. I was like, oh yeah, that was around 60 something, whatever, and then after learning more about like how much the movie was based on the book and how the story was, it was just it's a D-. And I just feel very betrayed by the fact that I had the impression that this was based on this guy's real life, and it was sort of like a summary, and that's why it lacked story. And then, well,
not necessarily story, I would say, but like direction or focus.
Yeah, okay. It was like, it just felt like a summarization rather than like a whole complete story. Like, I'm gonna use story, but after learning that, most of it was just, you know, them making stuff up. It's like, it hurts me.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely get into a talk about that. We all went into this, at least I did. I'm pretty sure you two did as well. We went in not knowing much about anything. I actually did not know anything about the Chris Kyle story. I'd heard that he was the most lethal sniper in U.S. military history. I didn't know anything beyond that. So I went in, I think, fairly fresh and unbiased. I wouldn't really recommend it either. I'm going to give it a C plus as well. I do think there's some entertaining sequences, and I think Bradley Cooper absolutely nailed his role. He is a little bit limited in what he can do with the script, but I do think he was absolutely perfect with it. But the movie itself is just kind of like a hodgepodge of other better movies. It's very unfocused. It doesn't commit to anything thematically. It just kind of happens, and there's a lot of jumping around between scenes, and I just feel I don't have any investment in the stakes or the characters. I mean, Bradley Cooper's pretty much the only interesting character in this movie, and even then, he's still painted in a fairly black and white way, I feel.
Yeah, and I think so. Like when we're saying it's sort of a hodgepodge and it's unfocused and all that sort of stuff, I guess we wish that it picked something and really fleshed out that one point, because it has this. Oh man, I forget the sniper's name. It's Mustafa.
Let's start off with this. Let's talk about the historical accuracy just first, so we can get that out of the way.
Okay.
So I don't know if this necessarily impacts. Well, I mean, for Sue it did. I don't know if it necessarily impacts my score for the movie, because again, I didn't know the true story watching the movie, but I did a little bit of post-watching research, and I learned that almost everything in the film is completely fiction or relatively inaccurate, as far as like his military campaigning goes. A large portion of this movie boils down to his sort of hunt for two characters, which is one is the butcher, and then another is a sniper named Mustafa, who is a Syrian Olympic sniper who is out killing Americans in Iraq. And that's the majority of the focus of the film, as far as like what he's doing in Iraq, is he's trying to find this other sniper and kill him, and they're constantly having like a little battle of wits.
But the thing that the film starts to kind of get really unfocused with, or it started to really get its really hodgepodge feeling, is that he's sort of chasing these two guys, yet all of a sudden it kind of cuts back to his struggle of like his inability to go home, not physically going home, but sort of emotionally, and it doesn't commit to either of the two.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And that's the part where we feel it's kind of unfocused and sort of just going, we'll focus on this part. Oh, I know, okay, we'll go on this part now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Mustafa is entirely fiction, from what I've read. It did not happen in real life. I think the character of Mustafa, I don't know if that's his actual name, is inspired by a real person who was out hunting Americans in Iraq, but at no point did Chris Kyle actually interact or run into this person, and apparently he is only mentioned in a brief paragraph in the book, and for some reason they decided to make the entire movie about this. It seems kind of weird that they would do that. There almost nothing in this is real.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the poster right now, and it has the American flag. It's just like it painted all of, like, you feel patriotic towards the country. It's like, it's kind of, like, in my opinion, it's kind of propaganda. And, like, it's gotta make you feel good about being American and stuff. Even though, in the beginning, it didn't set itself up as that, because he was struggling between shooting this kid who is about to who is about to throw a grenade at the soldiers, like, to either shoot this kid or not. And I thought that was, the question that we have to answer at the climax, just like any well-structured story should do.
Yeah.
And, but it wasn't at the end. It kind of comes back briefly, with the bazooka and the kid.
Yes.
But it's, like, that Mustafa thing kind of, like, steals focus, and something, like, and also about him and his wife having struggles because he keeps wanting to go back and stuff.
I might just be sort of going totally off on this, but like, I feel even if the film just focused on just I was starting to go like on Hurt Locker spoilers, but anyways, if the film itself just started to, or just focused on little incidences like that, where Chris Kyle struggles with making these decisions, or sort of like all these little micro incidences and how they change him and affect him, and like and it shows all these different reasons for why he can't go home, then okay, cool, I think I would be interested in that movie, and I think they could have really fleshed something out, but it touched on those scenes, I think, like twice, and then it was just he and his wife arguing, him saying he's staying and her saying, rightfully so, like, the family is growing without him, right? And it's just, I don't know, I felt like that could have been a really interesting film, but again, like, it didn't commit to that, and it didn't really commit to the whole chasing these two guys, because, like, he kills one of them in just sort of an action scene where all of a sudden he's like, oh, I found them, and he kind of, like, runs and shoots quite awkwardly a couple times, which I'm sure Nathan will get into, and then he just chases a car down a street, shoots at it a couple times, it explodes, it kills one of sort of the major villains, and then it's over, right? Like that section of it's over, and so it's just, it didn't, I don't know, it just didn't commit to anything, right?
The two scenes that Sue mentioned, I thought were the most thrilling scenes in the movie, and they were genuinely thrilling, and that is the scene that was much advertised in the trailer where, a mother and her son come out and they have a grenade and he's debating whether or not to shoot, and then the later scene, it's probably in the third act, where he's debating whether or not to shoot another child, I think even younger than the first one, where he's trying to pick up a rocket launcher from a fallen insurgent.
Who Chris Kyle shoots right before. And,
I thought those scenes were thrilling. It's a little deflating to learn that neither of those scenes were actually real. Apparently, in reality, just in that opening scene with the mother and son, there was no son, it was just the mother. And, it's weird little things like that where I'm like, I'm not quite sure why they embellish it so much. I think there's enough of a moral dilemma there. I don't think it actually hurts a scene because, from a film perspective, it's still a good scene. But it is kind of, it's disappointing to learn those things, that they just change so much.
Or it's the thing, like, they decided to change so much, and then at the end, they decided to put all those found footage, or, like, the original footage of, like, the... of his funeral and all that stuff, and make it all seem like this all happened. And it wasn't, and that's why I feel so betrayed. And
they're trying to sell it.
Yeah, they were trying to sell it.
They're trying to sell it as a true story.
Yeah, and at the end with the, like, whenever somebody puts up a title card and, like, explains the situation, that's sort of like a waving hint saying that this was real, and then the ending has a lot of things that
we'll get to.
We'll get to, but that's the thing, that if they had decided to make fictional, make something that is based on a true story but something fictional, why couldn't they commit to that the entire way through without having those the ending essentially?
I will say, for me, if the film was good, I don't think I would be as disappointed. I'd still be a little bit kind of disturbed that they would advertise it so much as being the true story of Chris Kyle. And the book is fresh. He was, he unfortunately is dead now, but he was alive only a matter of years ago. So it's like, it feels weird to distort it so much. But even if it was just a good movie, I think I would have forgiven a lot of its, historical inaccuracies. But I also just think it isn't that great of a movie. I mean, there's 3 movies come to mind when I think of this that I feel are comparable to. One is Black Hawk Down, which was a Ridley Scott movie made in the early 2000s.
2001, I believe.
Very accurate then.
Yeah.
One is The Hurt Locker, which I think is still the best film about the just the Middle Eastern War, like the North American armies, America, Canada, Britain, like all of us intervening in that country. I think that's still the best film that touches upon a lot of interesting aspects. And then also Zero Dark 30, which is, interestingly made by the same director and writer as The Hurt Locker. And so, I mean, all of these films have similar elements as American Sniper, but I just feel, unlike those films, it's very unfocused. It's like, we get aspects of his life at home, but then his wife isn't really a character. She's just sort of there. She's this blank slate to cry and be angry at him, and then pretty much nothing else, just to have the family and remind him of what he needs to come home to. And then we have this idea of a man who's obsessed, who wants to do his duty. But we don't really get a really interesting look at his psyche and what the war does to him. We get moments of that, and I think they're really interesting, but it doesn't really delve into that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sort of kind of lost in thought listening to you guys, and I almost wonder if it's these things that are so far away in terms of, like, his psyche and, him talking to his family and stuff like that. And it's just, I think part of it might be that the scenes don't feel like they don't feel each other, and and that's why we feel like it's a little bit unfocused, or
It's
not
like
just a little bit.
it
Quite a
feels
bit.
like the wife. You mentioned the wife, and wife is there because she was there in real life, and that's the only reason why she's there. She's not serving anything in terms of like the story purpose. She's not serving it very well, and that's why like this is fictional, and hence it being fictional, it has to have a story, and in this one, I don't know. I got this impression that maybe like the filmmakers kind of was trying to debate how to show this Chris Kyle person, and they couldn't decide on how to portray him, so they put all sorts of things that they could find that they thought was interesting, but couldn't find one thing that they could focus on, and that's why like we keep repeating the word that it was not focused at all, and that's why I guess it could have been a great movie. It has a very like interesting subject matter.
And there's great moments.
Yeah, and it has very great moments. Like it has like that first cut, like I said, like the gun, it was amazing, and then it just, kind of digs a hole for himself after that.
I think we're being a dead horse a little bit with saying it's unfocused. One thing that I did, I was going to get to the end, sort of, because that was something I found quite interesting. But maybe we shouldn't get right.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. Well, why don't we bring up the firefights?
I'd like to. Well, before we do that, I want to talk about this Mustafa character a little bit.
Okay.
So, I mean, he is largely fiction, and it seems kind of weird to me that in a modern movie about a very controversial war, and arguably a controversial figure. I mean, the book, there's a lot of controversy surrounding Chris Kyle's book. I don't really want to get into it too much because I don't feel I'm the best person qualified to really talk about these things. I haven't read the book, I don't know the guy, so I mean, there's only so much I could say. But I do know that in the movie, it does feel fairly black and white. Like, Mustafa is painted in a very villainous manner. He almost feels like a James Bond villain or a Bourne villain.
It's shot in that way.
Yeah.
The cinematography
jumping
on him
over
is
rooftops and...
Yeah, and the
Just away from the dun.
Yeah, I mean, the scene...
in the inside when they're, like, when he's preparing his guns and stuff, the lighting in that is just, it's just like...
very dark, and I mean, like, the one thing that caught me, it was just, it's a simple moment, but the thing that caught me is, there's one scene where someone gives him a call to let him know that, Americans are in the city, and while he's sitting there at the table, he's spinning a rifle bullet. And I mean, like, I'm not saying people don't do that, but it seems so villainous. Like, it's like, you immediately get this impression of someone who is evil. And
that is all he does.
Exactly.
This bullet is all he does.
There's only so much we see of this character, so when you do that, it just feels very villainous, and it's like, I'm not really sure, historical accuracy aside, I don't really know if we want a character that's actually a villain in a movie about a very controversial war.
Yeah, and it's, like, I think you nailed it on its head, where it's just because you have such limited screen time with him, anytime they just show those sort of small moments where he's, spinning the bullet or whatever, whenever we do see sort of these, the antagonists and stuff like that, it's like, we see them with, like, drills to children's heads, and
It was a brutal scene, yeah.
which was really interesting in a very, like, sort of hard to watch kind of way. But yeah, like, there's never sort of given any, like, the antagonists are never given a chance to seem sort of humanistic. It's just they're here to kill Americans or something of that of nature, and it's sort of, it makes Chris Kyle seem even more sort of saintly, and it's just when I feel like you could have done something a little more interesting like that, and not only that, but it's also real.
Which is very different from how he portrayed children of the war. Like how the children are portrayed as the victims almost, but the adults are all just villains. They're just villains, and they're nothing else. All the men and even the women, like the mom who like grabs a grenade and goes and throws, like tries to throw it at them again. Like she's almost like she's villain.
Also, that there's a few shots where they take over this family's house to try and get into this armory of some sort.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure. That scene was kind of confusing for me.
Yeah, me as well. But when they have a shot of the wife of the family, or the mother rather, it literally just sort of slid up to her, and then she had literally shifty eyes, she looked left, right, and looked at Bradley Cooper's character. I'm like, it just felt kind of cartoony in that sense, and it's just there. I don't know. It feels like Clint Eastwood is better than this.
I agree. It does feel like he's better than this, and I mean, even from Chris Kyle, the character, opposed to the real figure, even the character in this film, the only thing he really complains about in this entire movie is that he couldn't save more people. It's a very heroic thing, and I'm sure a lot of soldiers could feel that way. It's a very, what I would think, a natural feeling, if you see your comrades dying, that you couldn't save them, you couldn't help them. But at the same point, it doesn't really get into the other aspects of it, he killed kids. I mean, how much does that damage a person? I don't really know, because we don't really find out. There's nothing really... We see some effects of him being disturbed. There's that great moment where he's staring at a blank TV scene, and we're sort of hearing sound effects of the war around him. But we don't get enough of that to really... It doesn't focus on that, it comes back to that. It doesn't really hang on that.
It kind of feels unmotivated.
Actually, I think part of what we mean with all this unfocused stuff, I think what we mean, or at least what I'm starting to realize, is that whenever it brings up something that could be really interesting, it doesn't stick with it for long enough. It just starts to get the thing that, the part that was interesting with the TV is when the first time he comes home to visit his family, you see that he's watching TV and it's war, and he's watching the war, and so you're okay, even when he's not there, he's still watching it. And so when in the third act, when he's finally home, you think he's watching the war, but he's not. It's just sort of his memory. Okay, that's really cool. He goes, and then he joins his family in the back, and he's getting all these post-traumatic stress disorder kind of aspects to sort of his behavior, and then he's almost going out to smack the family dog, whatever. And it's all really interesting, and then boom, he goes to the doctors, and then they kind of just dispel it away with him saying I don't have issues, I just wish I could save more people. And he goes, hey, you can help veterans, great, boom, and then it's solved, right? It's problems. Anytime it brought up something that could be interesting or could carry tension through other scenes, it just stopped. They felt too isolated, and nothing sort of affected each other. Those scenes could have been way more interesting, especially if he's talking to his his wife about being home and all that sort of stuff, and he's suffering from and he's still hearing war noises and all that sort of stuff. That could have been really interesting.
I think
it just didn't.
The most emotionally affecting scene as far as anything PTSD related goes is when he's in the bar and he calls his wife, and she kind of asks him where he is, and he's like, "Oh, I'm stateside," and she's like, well, "What do you mean you're stateside? I thought you were off fighting the war. Where are you? Why aren't you here?" And he kind of just he can't answer that, and he just says I guess I needed a minute, and it's that to me is when the film started to approach on looking at a very distraught and disturbed figure of the effects of the war and what it can do to a person. I mean, he's credited with over 160 kills. I mean, that's got to do something to you. That's got to mean something. But we just don't get enough of that.
Yeah, that's why I want to give kudos to Bradley Cooper on doing such a fantastic job.
Yes.
Even though it he would have shined so much better if this had better storytelling and better editing, I want to say. Because I feel if we just leave out the fact that Chris Kyle is a real person, and just to take all the footage and re-edit everything, this would come, and have, a focus, I think it could be saved somehow. And, it has brilliant moments, and I sometimes feel there are two editors, one really, that comes up with all those brilliant moments, and the other one who's just, mediocre and, doesn't care about the story or whatever. But Bradley Cooper being able to do that, and Bradley Cooper doing that, and that not showing through entirely through through the film because it lacked in so many ways is kind of disheartening. I agree with him getting nominated, except this movie did not present him as well as it could have.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and something else that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just I was just gonna say, like, as much as like it seems that we're like, you know, not recommending this film, but like sort of bashing it around, like it's like I just want to say, at least to myself, I understand how hard filmmaking is, and like there's a lot of really difficult elements to it, so it's just like.
Always got to add the white knight element, huh?
Well, no, it's just
Well,
just like
okay,
like,
yeah,
like,
well,
wait,
that's
wait,
part of it,
wait,
but it's
wait.
Hollywood. It's Hollywood, okay? It's
Okay,
Hollywood. They gotta do a good job, otherwise it's like,
I know.
you know, why are you doing it with so much money?
I know, but I just it's.
And taking away all the, like, chances for other people.
I guess I'm gonna say, for like the people who haven't actually made films before, it's it's always easier, especially like when you're writing, like to look at someone else's script and be like, well, you can fix this, this, and this. And
Of course.
When you look at your own script, and it's just there's some weird sort of effect that when you look at your own script, you can't see anything.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes, right? That's not to say, and I think part of the reason why I'm a little more harsh on this film is because I feel like it could have been interesting, and that like I've seen some really interesting films from Clint Eastwood, and so you know I'm kind of like I don't quite understand why these like what happened, like oh my god, just like the fake baby thing.
Oh yeah, I was like.
Well, I mean that might just be a victim of circumstance, right?
But like okay, like I understand that part, but like even if you have to use it,
like. That fake baby could have been saved with the type of shots that they used.
I was gonna say that. That's like the one major thing they could have done.
If they shot that better, that fake baby did not have to suffer from people's criticisms.
And like even in like and okay, say you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with shots. You don't have to use the child. The child is not like the crux of the scene.
Why is the child there?
Well, no, actually, I disagree with that. I think that the child is actually a very important object in that scene because it's
even
the first,
if it's a fake one.
Well, hang on. It's the first major scene we're getting between Chris Kyle and his wife, where they're essentially having an argument about their family. Like it's the first time where she's like, "You need to change your attitude because this family is going to happen without you. This is your home, not the war." And while this conversation is happening, this very intense conversation, the baby is going back and forth between them, and I really like that. Unfortunately, it's a fake baby and it looks really bad. But I do think the baby is important to that scene, and it is unfortunate. Like if you don't know, apparently the first baby that they were going to use actually ended up having a fever that day, and then the second one was a no-show. So at some point, Clint Eastwood's like, just get a fake baby. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, like I think it could have been handled better because it is pretty jarring to look at.
Yeah, it is.
But
like I whispered to you and I said that's a fake baby, and I was like, I couldn't believe my eyes. Like usually when it's disguised very well, and I can't see, even though I can kind of glimpse at it and be like, oh, that's fake, but I still focus on the scene. But in that scene, I could not focus on the scene because it was a fake baby.
Yeah.
It was like staring right at us.
Which is very unfortunate because it's a very
exaggeration.
Emotionally intense scene.
Yeah, it's supposed to be very intense, and like you're saying, it's important that the baby is there because they're talking about it. There's like conflict between keeping the family and taking care of your family and protecting it or protecting your country, like Chris Kyle is trying to say. But in that scene, that fake baby took away all the focus because, it was being, it was being shown in a way that it wasn't supposed to. Like, I kind of wish that they were, like, if you, like, framed up, like, tiny little bit, then I would have been able to see that that's a fake baby.
I was just
it's like, it's plastic head and its eyes moving. I saw its eyes moving. You know how babies, like, close its eyes when it lies down and opens it when you put it up?
All I was going to say is, like, you want to still keep the baby, just wrap it in a blanket or something.
Yeah,
like I just
anything like that,
it's
or
but anyways, I think
tighter shots, anything.
I mean, I think
I think do it in post. Like,
anyways, I think we're done with that conversation.
Yeah.
We can move on.
Twilight did it with CG.
Okay, we can move on. It's okay. It was just a minor thing. We don't need to spend that much longer on it. Oh crap! See, I had a.
Well, while you're thinking, something that I want to bring up. The reason I mentioned The Hurt Locker and also Zero Dark 30. I mean, that one's a little bit different because it's not really a war film. It's mostly kind of like an espionage film, with the sort of last 30-minute military operation against the raid of Osama bin Laden. But the reason I bring those two movies up is because they have a very similar element of the main character becoming obsessed with something. I don't want to spoil either of these movies, but The Hurt Locker is it's a movie about obsession. And it's the same with Zero Dark 30. Both of these characters are absolutely possessed to accomplish something. And, I think they were trying to go for some of that with American Sniper. We have this sort of, that his home is becoming the war. He wants to protect more of his friends, and he wants to, kill more of the enemy, and he feels more comfortable being in a war zone than he does being at home. But I hate to go back there, but it does go back to the unfocused thing. It doesn't really thematically commit to anything. It just sort of hangs there. All these scenes kind of happen one after another. But yeah, and then I guess something else. This is probably just me. I mentioned this after watching the film. Is not even historical accuracy, but some scenes to me just felt a little unrealistic, as in like the way they're portrayed. When I watch a movie like Saving Private Ryan or Black Hawk Down, the firefights feel real. I mean, the soldiers look like they're trained, the actors look like they're trained soldiers. The way they handle weapons looks realistic. Now, I'm not saying like everything looked unrealistic in American Sniper, certainly not. But there just seemed like a lot of kind of Hollywoodish elements. There was a lot of what I want to call bullet
Say hello
spam.
to my little friend.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know there's such thing as suppressing fire and all these things in the military, but it's like every time someone was shooting at another person, there were just unloading magazines of bullets at each other, and it just seemed really kind of strange. And it also kind of bothered me that it's a movie called American Sniper, and we only see Bradley Cooper with his sniper rifle, doing that job for kind of a minimal portion of the movie. I mean,
20-25%.
Yeah, I mean, you get the opening, and then we get kind of like a little montage that shows him get like 5 or 6 kills, and then suddenly he's the legend. The movie just kind of tells us, you're like, oh, you've become legend.
Which I thought, like, even like that could have been an interesting part of the film.
Yes.
Where, like, if you want to tell the story about this guy, just show how he became the legend. But anyways,
or like he had to be.
over it.
It kind of made me feel like he had to be a hero, and like when he's not shooting a sniper, it kind of made me feel uncomfortable because I thought he was gonna get in trouble because there's nobody like, watching
I thought that
over
at first.
them.
Yeah.
Which could have been interesting, but go on, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a little disappointing because I mean, most of the movie he's just leading around this sort of elite group of soldiers, the SEAL team, to just hunt down the butcher and the sniper, and he's not really doing his sniping role, and then he gets accredited for all these legendary activities that apparently weren't important enough to show us, so we're just kind of left, and everybody just kind of calls him legend. They're like, hey, legend, and I'm just like, it sounds kind of corny to me. I mean, like, I know people could say that in real life, but it just sounds a little hokey. So yeah, that was some of my issues with like the execution.
Yeah, without being shown the evidence. Like,
Yeah.
Just kind of expository afterwards.
Yeah, why don't we sort of let's talk about the ending.
Yeah.
I feel like we'll spend a little time there, then we can kind of wrap up and summarize and say, feels unfocused. So, generally for me, for endings, I'm rarely satisfied. For whatever reason, whenever I watch a movie, I'm always, sorry, air bubble. With endings of films, I just go like, if only this worked or that worked or what have you. I'm a little bit disappointed, but burying everything, like considering how everything had been going with the movie, when he finally finds these veterans and all that sort of stuff, and he can help these people, I had a moment to myself, and I actually thought, considering I'm a fan of usually more tragic endings, just because I'm like that, I thought to myself, I would be satisfied with this ending. He finds a way to be home with his family and still feel like he's saving people. Mm-hmm. Okay, sure, you did a pretty nice way of tying everything together, and it's rare for me to feel largely satisfied, especially with the happy ending, quote unquote. And then it had this weird scene where all of a sudden Bradley Cooper's in his house and he's holding a gun. The camera angle's super low, and you get this like really weird, awkward feeling, and you feel sort of anxious, and like you quickly realize he's just playing a cowboy with his wife or whatever. But that scene before you sort of realize he's playing cowboy, it feels sort of. I was put on edge, and I was like, "That's weird," and it's kind of cool, and it was because of good direction and good camera placement, and even when he was talking to his wife, and you realize they're doing his little cowboy dance, what have you. I still felt a little bit on edge, and you realize essentially that at the end of it, he goes to help this veteran and he gets killed, right? And there was I wish I could see the shot again because the wife opens the door and sees this veteran, and I think like it might just be my imagination, and it might be just sort of the sort of choices of shots. But I felt like the camera was pushing in and zooming out. It was something going on with the shot that made me go, that guy is totally not trustworthy.
Yeah.
Something really weird is going to happen. And like Nathan had says, it's probably Bradley Cooper's wife looking through the door and all that sort of stuff.
Like a crack in the door.
Yeah, so it's like her POV sort of distorted. Like
Yeah.
I remember like distortion. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was, and I thought it was really, really well executed. That throughout that whole scene, I was put on edge, even though I probably shouldn't have been. And then,
and then the movie unceremoniously says, "And Chris Kyle died that day."
Like literally, it just cuts, and like you hear him saying like, "Hey, yeah, let's go get a Slurpee or some shit," and then he just dies, and like, holy shit! Like, there's no reason. I have no idea why he would just say, and then he died that day. But before I just smash living crap out of that choice, I want to say like the camera choice and sort of the choice of like in the editing of that particular scene, I thought was really well done.
Yes.
And I thought he was going to I thought this movie was going to sort of save itself with the ending, and it almost did, and then it just took a big steaming poop on the screen.
It was like, where's the cat? Oh, we don't have it.
And it was just
it felt very it felt very unfulfilling for me. I mean, like, I don't know why. Well, I mean, I have heard one thing. I don't know the validity of this. I don't know where this court case is. Apparently, there was some fear that it might, if they showed Chris Kyle being killed by this guy, it would influence the court case. Maybe.
Then why make the movie?
I don't really. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things. It's like I don't really get like if you're gonna. I don't know. It just seemed weird that they would just literally kind of build up an intense moment and then cut to black and go and Chris Kyle was killed that day, and then the movie just cuts to a bunch of real footage of his sort of passing away funeral and things like that, and it just felt very unfulfilling. Like it felt very hollow. I think it would have been a very powerful ending to actually see that ending unfold, where he meets this character that he wants to help, and something or other goes badly, and he ends up getting killed.
And if it's well directed, and it's both characters are given the chance to sort of show their humanistic side, you can show a character that kills Chris Kyle and still feels sympathetic, or at least maybe not sympathetic, but at least given the reason why he did it, right? And like after seeing this movie, I don't even know why the guy kills him. I don't know if it was like it was vengeful because like he couldn't save his brother while he was in the war, or like if the guy just suddenly started freaking out and had like had this post traumatic issue. Like there could have been so many interesting things. Like and you have this really interesting element where a guy that literally goes back for I think 2 hours doesn't get shot at and then gets killed by someone he's trying to help. I mean, like, that's a huge amount of irony this true story gives you that you can use as a director, and then to literally just flush it down the toilet. I'm not.
Or let's say filmmaker, because it might not be just the director's.
Well, that's true. He didn't write the movie, so
well,
there is that.
Or and also like other elements happening.
But like usually I'm a defender of the director and like people who producers and all that sort of stuff. But like if you're the director and you go that's the ending, you either go it has to change, I'm not doing it, or don't do it. Like it's just
producer.
Right? So I'm not, without ruining 7 or anything, there was a particular ending that both Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt loved, and then the producers or somebody went to change it. And then both those actors said, if you change that ending, I'm not doing this movie anymore. And they kept it, and like the ending of 7 is it's awesome, right? It's really interesting. I won't ruin anything, right? So like after I'm a believer of like picking your own battles, and sometimes I go, well, maybe this happened or maybe that happens, and I defend the director from, sometimes they just had to make a sacrifice. But when it's the ending of your film, like endings of your films are what you make the freaking movie for. There is no other. There's nothing else you should fight for more than the ending of a film, right? And
I think there's one thing I can bring up here. Just trying to look at it from both sides.
Sorry, I got a little impassioned there, but
yeah, just trying to look at it from both sides. But I mean, I feel there's even holes in this. But I think the one thing that might have been tricky is because no one survived. I think there was actually Chris Kyle and another one of the veterans he was with were killed. I don't think it was just Chris Kyle. Could be wrong about that. I'm sorry if I am. But I'm pretty sure what I read is that 2 people were killed from the third person they were visiting, which was that guy we saw at the end of the movie. And I guess the tricky thing about writing a scene like that for a true story is that no one is alive except for the account of the person who killed them. So, like, how do you write a scene about that event? But, I mean, the real problem with that is the entire movie is almost all fiction anyway. So, like, who really cares?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you write the scene the way you think it happened, and it's probably more accurate than just about anything else happened anyway.
I was gonna mention. Okay, first I want to note that shot there, like her POV when what's her name, Sienna Miller looks through the crack and sees him. I recently watched Nosferatu, and that reminded, the way that he was standing reminded me of Nosferatu. And watching Nosferatu is not that terrifying, but like that shot was terrifying. It made me jump in my seat. And so I was like, excited for what's about to happen next. Except I was very disappointed by what happened next.
The black screen text.
Yeah, the black screen text.
Just one line of text, too. Nothing, like, really conclusive. And he died that day.
Like, yeah, and, like, but the thing is, okay, so the court case was happening. 2 things. One, yes, it was, like, entirely fictional. So, make a point.
Okay, but, like,
to,
say,
like,
okay,
and
like,
say that this is totally fictional. If it, like, and
well,
don't read any court cases. Just, like, let the writer don't read anything and just write and make something up. And, like...
But the thing, like, the one thing is, like Sue keeps saying it's fictional, but the thing is just there's still, like, the producers of the studios and stuff, they're still going on the idea that this is a true story, right? So, like, they're not running under the assumption that they're telling a fictional story.
They can't advertise it and say this is based on true story, or, like, this is really close to true story if they are going to do that ending. They can't, because that's going to affect the court.
Because and so then let's be honest, like, they probably think, and I don't know if it's true or not, they probably think they're gonna make more money if it's a true story, right? Although I did watch the trailers and the 2 official ones anyways, and they never say their true story. They find very clever ways around it, like saying the most lethal sniper in U.S. history.
Yeah, I mean,
stuff, right?
like,
but
there's when you see.
I still had a second point.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. My second point is that scene. From what I gather with the lack of it, is about him being able to save more American soldiers. And that veteran was an American soldier that he could have saved, which, I guess as a writer, could have portrayed as him saving the soldier by dying. If you were trying to put a hero up on the screen, I felt like that could have kind of helped it, and kind of, like, put, like, an ending and, and the... kind of, like, tie the story together, but...
Yeah, I see what you're getting at there.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, he is supposedly a veteran. I mean, I think, for me, what I would have liked to have seen, the reason I would have liked to have actually seen that ending is because they're all veterans together, and the idea of someone who is, like, very frail and suffering from PTSD to kill 2 other veterans, I mean, it's a very interesting scenario, and unfortunately true, but a very interesting scenario is, why did this happen? And you would be able to really see... This is a character who is cracked. Like, his psyche is cracked by war. But except we don't see it. We don't get any of that.
I will say this, though. That's a very radical choice not to show the ending of that. It's a very radical choice.
It's a crappy ending.
Well, okay. Yeah, that is my point. It is a very bad one, but it is a very radical choice. So kudos on the filmmakers in making that choice, or whether they had a choice to make that or not. But it didn't work. Okay, so we learned that it didn't work from this experience.
It's like,
$13.
well, it's just, hey, you know what's really cool? This climax. Okay, let's not show it. It's just, anyways.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's even worsened by the fact that they almost, like, build something up.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like the worst thing is like I commended, the director and the editor and everybody a part of it, to sort of create this really suspenseful, sort of tension-filled, even like in a scene that shouldn't have tension. For me, had an immense amount of tension, which became even more interesting. They literally they're like dun dun, and like, okay, cool, and then they go dun. Nah, just kidding.
And
like,
that's potential. It had so much potential.
Yes.
And if you know that you can't show it and stuff like that, then just okay. And anyways, we've beaten the idea to like a pulp. But like I guess to sum everything up, we just thought like there could have been so many other ways than this way. Like I felt like the reason that we're sort of all is very impassioned about the ending is because they chose like one of the worst possible ways of doing this, of doing the ending, at least in my opinion. Aside from that,
and why show his funeral? Why show his funeral? Like why? Like I don't.
Well, I get
It's like-
why showing the funeral stuff. It's like to make it feel more true, or whatever. But, anyways, I think we talked about this film longer than I thought we were going to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on a lot of it. It had a lot of potential, and unfortunately, I just don't feel it lived up to it. I think there were great moments, but as a whole, it's pretty weak. It's kind of like this kind of hobbled together machine that half works.
Still better than Godzilla.
Sue has very strong opinions about particular
because
films.
this had a lot more potential than whatever that film was.
Well, that can be
whatever that
debated.
film
Yeah,
was.
One thing I just want to end this on is slow motion CGI bullet.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood,
my
you
God.
are better than that. No. Absolutely no. Alright, I'm done.
Yeah, we came up with like 3 or 4 better ways of showing that scene in about 2 minutes in the theater.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're not gonna keep going. I think you got our opinions on everything. Hopefully, we got something you can think about. Maybe you have particular opinions. Maybe this is your favorite movie, and that we have just got it all wrong.
If you do, then please comment and
Yeah.
answer sensibly, and we'll reply sensibly.
Yeah. Anyways, again, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you for listening, and look out for our next episode.
Thanks
again,
for listening to Second Perspective.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's Nathan Smith. I'm Paul Weston, and that was Sue Min Park. Take care, guys.
Thanks.